Imagine growing old, pouring 30 whole years of your life into raising a boy, only to find out he was never yours to care for. That was my reality, back in my first life. My name is Alara Hale. For decades, a little boy named Silas had called me Mom. Starting from the days he first learned to string words together, I was the one sitting up beside his bed when pneumonia burned through his small body. I trimmed the hard crusts off every sandwich he ate. I forced myself to learn the messy rules of soccer, all because that was the sport he lived and breathed. The night before his college admissions interviews, I stayed wide awake right alongside him, trying to calm his shaking nerves. When he fell and fractured his arm at 12 years old, I slept propped upright on one of those hard plastic hospital chairs, my hand wrapped tight around his uninjured wrist. When he turned 28 and got married, I knelt down 5 minutes before the wedding ceremony to stitch a loose button onto his formal suit jacket. I cried so hard through the wedding vows that his new bride laughed and pressed a second tissue into my shaking hand. Back then, I truly believed this child had been placed into my arms by fate itself. That my husband Cale had told me Silas belonged to his close college friend Elias. Cale said Elias and his wife had died together in a terrible highway crash, leaving the infant boy all alone. Cale had come home carrying that swaddled baby, his face painted with what I thought was raw, crushing grief. He told me Elias had made him swear that little Silas would never end up inside the cold foster care system. I'd already loved Cale for 8 years by that point. I cherished the soft kindness I thought I saw in him. My heart ached for that terrified tiny infant tucked against his chest. And so I said yes. I said yes to temporary guardianship. I said yes to rearranging my entire work schedule. I said yes to passing up a big-time work promotion, because Silas kept coming down with painful, recurring ear infections that demanded constant attention. Later on, I said yes to officially becoming his legal guardian. I even agreed to put off having my own biological child, because Cale kept warning me Silas would feel pushed out and replaced. Year after year slipped by, and that choice stopped feeling like something I could undo. By the time I hit 56, a stubborn worsening illness landed me in Mercy General Hospital for major surgery. Silas flew all the way in from the West Coast to be at my side. Cale sat beside my hospital bed day in and day out. And then Lila Voss showed up. She carried fresh white lilies, and tears glistened in her striking gray-green eyes. Lila had always lingered at the edges of our household. She was Cale's high school first love. She'd also been my classmate back in university. That coveted overseas study fellowship, the very spot I'd turned down in my junior year, had gone straight to her. She worked as a high-profile international consultant. She sent Silas incredibly expensive birthday gifts every single year. She'd show up at our holiday dinners with wild, glamorous stories from London, Geneva, Hong Kong, Singapore. Once, I'd even thanked her for caring so deeply for Elias's supposed orphan son. She'd smiled at me then, and that very smile haunted me all the way to my death. The ugly truth spilled out because of hospital paperwork. Silas had volunteered to get tested, to see if he could serve as a possible organ donor for me. When my doctors brought up genetic compatibility, a nurse accidentally left part of the family history file spread out across the table. I glanced down, and there, printed clear as day, right next to biological mother, was Lila's full name. At first I told myself it had to be a silly clerical mix-up. Then my eyes drifted across the page. Under biological father, it read Cale. The world didn't explode with some big, dramatic crash. There was no deafening roar to match how completely my whole existence had shattered. I just sat there, stuck under those harsh fluorescent hospital lights, gripping 3 thin printed sheets of paper. 30 full years of my life rearranged itself in my mind, and every confusing, puzzling moment from decades past finally made perfect sense. I got my lawyer to arrange a private DNA test. The results confirmed every terrible suspicion I held. I didn't march straight up to them and blow everything apart right away. I needed to find out just how deep this web of lies really ran. What I uncovered was far worse than simple infidelity. Lila had gotten pregnant back when they were all still in college. Cale had known about that baby long before he talked me into giving up my overseas study opportunity at our university. Lila was ranked directly below me for that fully funded exchange partnership with the Copenhagen School of Business. She would only get that precious spot if I chose to turn it down. She needed to get out of the city fast, Before her pregnancy became obvious to everyone on campus, going to Europe gave her the perfect excuse to vanish for months at a time. And Cale needed me to stay behind. Not like he'd claimed, because he couldn't survive one whole year living apart from me. No. He needed me to be that steady, reliable woman who would clean up the mess the two of them had created. I was still processing all of this when I overheard voices drifting in through my hospital room door. Lila spoke first. Her tone was sharp and urgent. You promised she would never find out. Cale sounded worn thin, completely drained. She raised him for 30 years. What difference does a DNA test make at this point? There was a short pause. Then Lila said the line that would replay inside my head until my last breath. I was willing to give birth to him. I was never willing to actually raise him. But Alara was. Cale answered her. And his words cut deeper than any scalpel. It was as if I wasn't a human being at all. Just some resource they could pull off a shelf whenever they needed one. As though every bit of my kindness was nothing more than a pre-planned line item inside their scheme. 3 days after that, surgical complications set in. And I died. My last clear memory is looking up at Cale, asking him one simple question. If I had taken that Copenhagen spot all those years ago, what would you two have done? For once, he didn't have some polished, rehearsed reply ready. He just stared blankly down at the blanket covering my legs. We would have figured something out. Of course they would have. They always did. For 30 long years, their solution had been me. Then my eyes flew open. I was 21 again. My dorm room smelled like cheap instant coffee, mixed with the overpowering lavender laundry detergent my roommate loved to overuse. Rain tapped and pattered against the old window panes. A tall stack of finance textbooks leaned against my laptop. For several long seconds, I couldn't move a muscle. I looked down at my hands. They were smooth and unlined. No wedding band sat on my finger. No plastic hospital wristband. There was no faint scar wrapping around my wrist from that major surgery I'd endured when I was 43. My laptop screen glowed bright right in front of me. It showed our university's international programs webpage. Bold text popped out at me. Congratulations, Alara Hale. You have been selected for the fully funded Copenhagen exchange program. Please confirm your participation by this coming Friday. Beneath that message sat a blue button that read Accept Offer. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Cale popped up. Alara, can I come over tonight? We really need to talk about Europe. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, and it almost twisted into a sob. Back in my first life, I knew exactly what speech he was about to deliver. A year apart is far too long. Long distance changes people. We're building our future together. Other opportunities will come along later. After he'd left, I'd cried my eyes out. The next morning, I'd clicked decline. 2 days after that, Lila got the exchange placement. This time around, I didn't wait for Cale to show up at my door. I hit accept. A confirmation box popped onto the screen. Are you absolutely certain? I typed yes. Right away, I uploaded a scan of my passport. I confirmed my housing deposit. I filled out every last scholarship form. I saved every single receipt into a brand new, password-protected private folder. Only once the official confirmation email landed in my inbox did I pick up my mobile phone. Cale had fired off 3 more messages. Alara, I'm serious. Don't submit anything before we talk. Please just wait for me. I typed one short reply. I accepted the offer. The typing indicator popped up immediately, vanished, then flickered back on again. Just then my dorm door swung open. My roommate Maya stepped inside, holding 2 paper coffee cups. She looked me over. You look like you just pulled off a bank heist. I turned my laptop screen so she could read it. Her eyes went wide. No way. You actually took it. I did. She let out a little scream, dropped her backpack onto the floor, and pulled me into such a tight hug that coffee sloshed out over the cup lids. You're really going to Copenhagen? I closed my eyes. After 35 years, those words finally belonged to me. I whispered it quiet to myself. I'm going to Copenhagen. The next morning, I ran into Lila right outside our behavioral finance lecture hall. She carried that effortless sort of beauty that looked completely unforced to outsiders. Pale blonde hair twisted loosely into a messy knot. She wore a soft camel-colored overcoat and tiny gold hoop earrings. Even when she wandered into class late, Professors always somehow remembered her full name. In my first lifetime, I'd envied how easy everything seemed for her. Much later, I learned just how much careful work went into crafting that laid-back appearance. She matched my pace as I walked toward the lecture entrance. "Alara, can I ask you something?" I already knew exactly what question was coming. "Sure. Have you made up your mind about Copenhagen?" She kept her tone casual, but her thumb nervously rubbed back and forth over the leather strap of her purse. I'd seen that exact same fidgeting motion decades later, inside my hospital room. I said it plainly. "Yeah, I've decided. I accepted the spot." For less than a single second, her eyes sharpened. That split-second flash told me everything I needed to know. Then her practiced smile slid right back onto her face. "Oh, that's wonderful news. I thought you might hold back because of Kale. I was worried about him, sure, but now I'm worrying about myself first." That answer confused her far more than anger would have. We walked into the lecture hall together. Normally she would sit down right beside me. That day she picked a seat 2 rows behind me. I could feel her gaze burning into the back of my head the whole class. I never turned around once. At lunch later on, Maya told me Lila had already gone up to 2 different students, asking whether exchange acceptances could still be reversed. Why is she so wrapped up in this? Maya wondered out loud that she's the first alternate candidate. I told her that. Maya frowned. She could just reapply next year, couldn't she? There are reasons she can't wait. What reasons? I stared down into my soup bowl. The truth sat heavy in my chest. Lila was already pregnant. If this timeline mirrored my old life, she was roughly 9 weeks along. I could have exposed her right then. I could have confronted Kale. I could pull screenshots, force confessions, go to their families, and watch their carefully hidden secrets blow up all over campus. In those disorienting moments right after my rebirth, I'd imagined doing exactly that. But then my mind drifted back to Silas. I pictured him at 6 years old, fast asleep, his cheek resting heavy against my arm after a brutal fever finally broke. I thought of 17-year-old Silas asking me whether every heartbreak had to feel like total humiliation. I pictured that grown-up young man standing beside my hospital bed, terrified I was going to die. He never got to choose the messy circumstances of his birth. I refused to weaponize him. Not even before he was born. And honestly, I didn't even need to. The most devastating thing I could do to Kale and Lila was leave their problem exactly where it belonged. On them. That evening, Kale was waiting outside my dorm building. He wore that navy blue knit sweater I'd given him as a Christmas gift years back in my first life. Once upon a time, seeing him in that sweater would have softened my heart before he even opened his mouth. Now it only reminded me how many hours I'd spent picking out nice clothes for a man who could orchestrate a secret pregnancy, yet could never remember to buy new toothpaste for himself. "Can we talk?" he said. "We can talk right here outside." His eyebrows drew together. I almost never intentionally made him uncomfortable. He clearly didn't know how to handle it. He stuffed both hands deep into his jacket pockets. "You really hit accept?" "I did. You knew I wanted to sit down and talk this through first. It was my opportunity." "I get that," his voice tightened up. "But this affects both of us. Graduation affects us too. That's not comparable." "Why not?" "Because you'll be gone for almost a full year." And there it was. He delivered that whole speech, almost word for word just like he had in my past life. Long-distance relationships are so hard. My cousin's romance fell apart for exactly that reason. We've been together since freshman year. Our senior year matters so much. Job recruiting will be incredibly stressful. We're supposed to build our post-college future side by side. And finally, the line I remembered all too well. Other chances will pop up down the road. I pushed back. "Name one for me." He blinked in surprise. "What?" "Name one fully funded international placement that gives me graduation course credits, a research assistant position, plus access to the Nordic Banking Consortium." "That's not the point I'm trying to make. But it's my point." He rubbed one palm over his jawline. "Alara, I just assumed you would pick us." I let him relax for half a second, then I kept speaking. "I am picking us. I'm picking the version of us where neither person has to destroy their own future just to prove how much they care." All of the relief drained off his face. You're twisting everything around. No. I'm simplifying it. I'm going to Copenhagen. He looked at me, waiting for that familiar moment where I'd reach out and grab his hand. I kept my arms at my sides. What if I tell you I can't do long distance? He asked. Up back in my old life, those vulnerable-sounding words would have terrified me. This time I just shrugged my shoulders. Then I guess we learned something really important before we graduate. His expression hardened. You'd throw away 3 whole years over a semester abroad? 2 semesters, actually. That misses the whole point. You keep saying that. I stepped closer, not out of affection, but so every single word landed crystal clear for him. Cale, if just 1 year apart can break everything we have, why on earth would I give up my future to hold on to something that fragile? He had no answer for that. I walked right past him toward the dorm entrance. Ilara. I paused, but I did not turn around. Is there somebody else? The irony of that question hit so hard I could barely breathe for a beat. I glanced back over my shoulder. No, not yet. But there was already another person tangled up inside our relationship. And this time she gets to stay your problem, not mine. The next 6 weeks felt deeply strange living this second chance. On the surface, very little shifted. I attended every lecture. I finished all my group assignments. I put in 12 hours each week working in the library's finance lab. I met repeatedly with the International Programs Office to get all my visa paperwork sorted out. Behind the scenes, though, Cale and Lila were steadily unraveling. I recognized every single warning sign. I'd lived alongside both of them for decades in my previous life. Cale grew constantly distracted. He checked his phone every few minutes. He started skipping scheduled study sessions, and he blamed it all on job recruiting interviews. Lila stopped drinking coffee entirely. She ran out of 2 lectures early, complaining of nausea. All her loose-fitting sweaters started hanging even more loosely on her frame. Neither of them realized I could read every little move they made as plainly as watching subtitles play across a screen. Oddly enough, Cale turned incredibly attentive toward me. Bouquets of flowers showed up at my dorm room. He booked a table at that Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. He offered to help me pack up my belongings. He started saying all those sweet lines I'd begged to hear from him back in my first lifetime. I'm so proud of you. You know I support you, right? We're going to make long-distance work. That it would have moved me if I didn't understand what was driving it. He needed me to stay emotionally attached to him, while he scrambled to find some other way to fix Lila's pregnancy crisis. So I let him keep putting on that performance. But I stopped giving anything back to him. That difference became obvious almost right away. Cale had relied on me for far more than simple affection, that I used to proofread every single one of his internship applications. I reminded him about every upcoming deadline. I edited all his cover letters. I booked cheap train tickets whenever he traveled for interviews. I kept organized shared notes for our hardest classes, because he was terrible at keeping track of his own schoolwork. Back then, I called all of that love. Now I saw it for what it really was, unpaid labor. When he sent me a draft cover letter text, asking, "Can you polish this for me?" I texted back, "I'm finishing my own application right now. Good luck." When he forgot a career fair deadline, I kept my mouth shut. When he showed up to class without the spreadsheet for our group valuation project, I sent my finished section straight to our professor, instead of rebuilding his messy work from scratch. He grew irritable. "You've been acting so weird lately. I've just got a lot going on. You used to always help me out. I used to have less of my own future to focus on." He just stared at me. I gave him a small smile, and went back to my laptop screen. The exchange program was formally recognized at a small reception held inside the International Center. 12 students from our university were heading out to partner schools across Europe and Asia. My father drove all the way down from Maine for this event. He wore that same gray suit he'd had on for my high school graduation. He hugged me so hard I nearly lost my balance on my feet. "Your mother would have bragged about this achievement to every single person shopping at the grocery store." He said that there was warmth in those words. My mother had passed away when I was 14. After she was gone, Dad and I showed our love for each other through practical things. Car oil changes, tuition payments, weather alerts, grocery store gift cards. Neither of us really knew how to sit with grief. In my old life, I told him I'd rejected Copenhagen because I wanted to focus on job recruiting. He'd believed me. Years later, when I finally admitted Cale had pushed me into that choice, Dad stayed quiet for a very long time. Then he said, "You were always allowed to choose yourself." I didn't fully grasp how badly I'd needed to hear those words until it was far too late. Now he stood beside me as the program director handed me my official folder. Across the room he called out, "You earned every bit of this." Lila was there too. She wasn't supposed to attend this reception. Alternate candidates hadn't received invitations. She stood near the doorway, chatting with Professor Hale. She kept asking questions about whether students who'd already accepted the exchange could still pull out, even after paying the housing deposit. Our eyes locked. Once my dad walked off to grab a cup of coffee, she stepped over toward me to, "Congratulations again." "Thanks. You're really set on going through with this?" "I signed my housing contract yesterday." Her fingers squeezed tight around the stem of her water glass. "What would happen if you needed to fly home early?" "I don't plan on coming back early. People get sick all the time. I have travel health insurance. Family emergencies pop up out of nowhere. My dad's in good health." She let out a sharp huff of breath. Then she seemed to realize how strange her questions sounded, and she forced a laugh. I'm just jealous, honestly. You could always reapply next year." Something angry flickered deep in her eyes. I might not have that option. I knew exactly why, but all I said was, "That's really unfortunate." That same night, Lila and Cale got into a screaming fight in the parking lot behind the business school. I never heard their argument myself. Maya did. She burst back into our dorm, her eyes wide. "Your boyfriend and Lila were having some huge, explosive fight out there." I heard her yell, "You told me she was going to back out." Then Cale was hissing at her to keep her voice down. My finger hovered over my keyboard. Even knowing every secret already, hearing that real-life confirmation sent a cold chill running through my whole body. Maya leaned against my desk. "Elara, is something going on between those two?" "Yeah, something is." "Do you know what it is?" "I can't prove all of it just yet." She studied my face. "You don't even look shocked." "I'm way past shock," I told her. That was the honest truth. Shock belonged to that woman lying in the hospital bed back in my first life. The me I was now had far more important priorities. The very next afternoon, I requested copies of every official document connected to my exchange acceptance. I saved the date-stamped offer letter. I stored my formal acceptance confirmation. I downloaded the alternate candidate list that showed Lila held the second-place rank. I also saved all those text messages Cale had sent me, begging me to hold off on making my final decision. That I had no idea whether I would ever actually need those files. But 35 years of living had taught me one hard lesson. People can deny memories all day long. Official documents cannot lie. Cale never showed up at the airport to see me off. It should have stung far worse than it did. He'd promised twice he would come, the night right before my flight. Back in my old life, he'd texted saying a sudden urgent family crisis had come up. I would have bombarded him with questions. I would ask what was wrong, if he needed me, whether I should reschedule my flight at this time. I just texted back, "Hope everything works out okay." Then I flipped my phone onto silent mode and finished packing my bags. My dad drove me out to Logan Airport before sunrise. Maya tagged along too, wrapped up in our university sweatshirt. Carrying a crumpled paper bag stuffed full of snack food I simply had no space left for in my luggage. At the security checkpoint, Dad pressed a thick envelope into my palm. "Emergency cash." "Dad, I already have money saved up." "Good. Now you have even more." I laughed. His eyes glistened a little. "Call me the second your plane lands safely." "I will." Maya pulled me into a hug. "At least do one wildly irresponsible thing while you're overseas." "I'm going to Denmark. Not joining a band of pirates." "Same general vibe," she joked. I was still smiling as I walked toward the security lines. Then my phone buzzed. It was Cale's name lighting up the screen. For a moment, two separate lifetimes overlapped inside my head. In one timeline, I'd stayed in Boston, convinced loving Cale meant always being available for him. In this new reality, my boarding pass sat tucked safely in my hand and I answered the call. "Hey, where are you?" "At the airport. You're already there. My flight takes off in 2 hours. There was silence on his end. I thought your flight was this afternoon. I sent you the full itinerary. I've been dealing with stuff, he said vaguely that I knew exactly what stuff meant. Lila had ended up in urgent care the night before. She'd had bleeding and sharp abdominal pains. In my first life, Lila mentioned years later that she'd nearly lost Silas early on in that pregnancy, and Cale had stayed right by her side. Is everything all right? I asked. Yeah, it's fine. His reply came far too fast. Alara, I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the airport. I'll make this up to you somehow. You don't owe me anything. Another pause. You sound different. Really? Distant. I watched a family ahead of me reorganize their suitcases. A father lifted a sleepy toddler up onto his shoulders. I'm just no longer begging you to show up somewhere you don't want to be. I told him. That isn't fair. Maybe it isn't. Alara, they're starting boarding for the international flights. I have to go. Wait. His voice sharpened. Tell me you love me. That request stopped me cold. I had truly loved him through most of 2 different lifetimes. Those feelings didn't vanish overnight just because I'd learned all his dark secrets. Love wasn't a simple on-off switch. That was the cruel, painful part. But loving someone never meant I owed them blind obedience. I loved the version of us I believed we could be. I said softly to Alara, what on earth is that supposed to mean? I'll give you a call once I'm settled in. I hung up the call right after boarding the plane. I sat down by the window seat. Below me, the city of Boston faded away under a thick blanket of clouds. I cried quietly for 20 minutes. I made no noise at all. My tears weren't for Cale, not really. I grieved for that woman who died in that hospital room, convinced her whole life had been stolen in one single massive betrayal. That wasn't how it happened. My life had been given away, piece by tiny piece, through thousands of small choices. One opportunity pushed aside. One promotion turned down. One dream put on hold. One heavy burden accepted because somebody called that sacrifice love. Late summer Copenhagen was bright, windy, unbelievably clean. Streams of bicycles flowed in organized lines through every street. The harbor water shimmered bright blue under a sky that felt far bigger and wider than Boston's. My student housing had a narrow single bed, a shared communal kitchen, and a window looking out over a courtyard crammed full of parked bikes. Standing in that tiny room with my 2 suitcases, I felt richer than I'd ever felt in that big 5-bedroom suburban house where I'd drawn my last breath in my first life. For 3 whole days, nobody needed anything from me. That kind of freedom carried a faint edge of loneliness. Then orientation activities kicked off. I met students flying in from Spain, Germany, Singapore, Canada, France, South Korea. I got lost twice. I tried pickled herring once and decided that was more than enough new cultural experience for that week. On my 4th day in the city, I met Alex Morgan. The first thing I noticed about him was how undramatic he was. He was assisting Professor Nygaard at a research workshop focused on cross-border banking regulation. He had dark hair that desperately needed trimming. His British accent had softened after many years living in the United States. He had this habit of pausing before answering questions, like silence didn't scare him one bit. I pointed out a flaw in one of his assumptions about consumer risk modeling. Instead of getting defensive or annoyed, he simply asked, "What approach would you use instead?" I laid out my reasoning. He actually listened, fully listened. Then he turned toward the rest of the workshop group. Alara is correct. My model puts too much weight on short-term liquidity. Let's fix this. That easy willingness to admit he was wrong genuinely surprised me. Back home, Cale always treated any form of correction as a personal insult. Once the workshop wrapped up, Alex caught up with me outside the room. You go to Northwood University? That's right. I spent a semester there 2 years ago. Wow. Did you survive it? Barely. The coffee over there is absolutely terrible. Our coffee is totally normal. That stuff counts as punishment, not a beverage. I laughed despite myself. He glanced down at my notebook pages. Professor Nygaard is looking to hire a research assistant. You should apply for the role. I've only been here 4 days. So, you understood that model well enough to pick apart my argument in front of everyone. I politely corrected one small assumption. I said that. He looked at me, pretending to be disappointed in how polite I'd been. I laughed. He didn't ask whether I had a boyfriend. He didn't flirt. He didn't tell me what choices I ought to make. That evening, he just sent the application link straight over to my inbox that I applied 2 days later. Professor Nygaard offered me the position. Thousands of miles back in Boston. Lila was reaching the end of her first trimester of pregnancy. I could tell because Kale's messages kept rolling in, always hitting my phone in the middle of Copenhagen's midnight hours. When are you flying home for Thanksgiving? Could you come back earlier? Do you really need to stay all the way through January's final exams? I answered that last question. Yes. His reply popped up instantly. We need to talk about our future. I glanced around the university library. Spreadsheets were open across my laptop screen. Piles of research notes stacked up beside me. Through the glass windows, I could see the city lights glowing across Copenhagen. For the very first time, the idea of our future no longer filled me with fear. I'd finally understood something critical. That future didn't have to include Kale at all. Thanksgiving had once been one of my favorite holidays back in college. In my first life, Kale and I would split the holiday break between our two families. My dad lived alone up in Maine. Kale's parents hosted huge, crowded dinners out near Worcester. There were cousins running everywhere, football playing nonstop on the television, silly fights over pie, and every single year someone forgot to thaw the turkey properly. Back then, I'd spent my junior year Thanksgiving right alongside Kale's family, after I'd turned down the Copenhagen exchange. Lila was already gone by that point. Everyone bought the story that she was off overseas preparing for her study abroad term. In this new timeline, I stayed right where I was in Denmark. My dad got on a video call with me, and he told me plainly how proud he was of my choice. Plane tickets cost an arm and a leg this time of year, he said over the screen. Just come home once your program wraps up. I'm not going anywhere. There was so much quiet love inside that line. When I was 21 the first time around, I'd completely missed what those words really meant. He wasn't saying you must stay close to me. What he meant was, I'll still be here, even when you go out chasing your own life. Kale took the news badly. His voice came through my laptop camera, tight with frustration. You're not coming home at all for the holiday? I've got a big research deadline the Monday right after Thanksgiving. You could just do that work from Boston. I can also get the work finished from my desk here in Copenhagen. Those are not the same thing. He leaned in closer toward the webcam. Dark circles hung heavy underneath his eyes. For a split second, old reflexes kicked in. 30 years of marriage had trained my body to feel sympathy the moment I saw him worn out and exhausted, before my brain stopped to ask exactly why he was so drained. Then reality crashed back. Lila was pregnant. She was scared. She was angry. And she was slowly figuring out something brutal. A pregnancy wouldn't vanish just because the woman they'd planned to dump all this mess on had boarded an international flight. You look really run down, I said. I've got job recruiting on my plate among other things, he answered quickly. Just take care of yourself. His eyes narrowed. I could feel him growing annoyed. You don't even want to know what I'm dealing with these days? If you want to tell me something, go ahead and say it. He opened his mouth. I waited. I'd pictured this moment countless nights after arriving in Copenhagen. I wondered if he would finally confess everything. Not because guilt had changed his heart, but because mounting pressure might make honesty feel easier than keeping up all those lies. That he glanced away from the camera. It's complicated. I gave him a calm reply. Then deal with it. His head snapped back toward the screen. What? If this is your mess and you don't feel like you can talk to me about it, that's your call. But then you need to handle the fallout all on your own. Everything with you feels so transactional now, he huffed. No. I've just stopped volunteering to fix problems nobody will even explain to me. His jaw clenched tight. Some faint sound drifted from somewhere behind him. A woman's voice, quiet but clearly irritated, called out Kale's name. He hit the mute button instantly. I sat perfectly still. He turned away from the screen and spoke to somebody standing out of camera view. After roughly a minute, he unmuted his microphone again. Sorry, that was my mom. Kale's parents didn't live anywhere near Boston. I almost let a faint, bitter laugh escape. Say hi to her for me. I said that. He just stared at me blankly. I have to get off this call. All right. Alara, don't you miss me? The question landed soft and heavy. Truth be told, part of me did miss him. That was the humiliating, messy piece of healing. I missed the boy he'd been freshman year. The one who brought soup over to my dorm when I came down with the flu. I missed all those late nights studying together down in the library basement. I remembered dancing barefoot at Maya's 21st birthday party. I grieved for that bright future I'd once imagined we would build side by side. But fond memories don't erase a person's real character. I miss parts of that old life sometimes, I admitted. His shoulders relaxed a little. I kept talking to. But missing someone is not the same thing as needing to run back to them. I ended the video call before he could push back. The very next morning, an email landed in my inbox from Professor Nygaard. He'd put my name forward for a winter research placement at Bestgard Capital. That was a mid-sized investment firm building brand new cross-border risk assessment models. My first instinct was to turn it down. This position would add 20 extra hours every single week to my already packed schedule of classes and ongoing research work. I could hear my old inner voice ringing loud in my head. You'll be far too busy. You need to leave space open for your relationship with Kale. Then I laughed out loud, standing there in the dorm's shared kitchen. My whole first life had been filled with empty space I'd saved for people who were never actually going to show up for me. I fired off a reply accepting the interview. I only asked Alex to help me prepare after I'd made the decision myself. That small detail meant more than I could put into words. Want me to run mock interview questions? He asked. Or should I just look over my written answers? Mock questions. Make them brutal, not gentle. Brutal it is. He put me through a grueling practice session. He picked apart every assumption I made. He cut me off whenever my answers grew weak and vague. He forced me to explain exactly why these complicated risk models should matter to everyday borrowers who would never read a single line of that math. When I grew frustrated and flustered, he didn't jump in to rescue me. But when I finally landed on the right answer, he gave me a small, genuine smile. There we go. That's the version where you stop trying to sound impressive and just tell the plain truth. That same evening, I got word I'd landed the placement. Not long afterward, Maya rang me from Boston. She looked like she'd been sitting by her phone all day waiting to share news. Remember how I told you Lila kept wearing those huge baggy sweaters? Yeah. She fainted right in the student center. An ambulance showed up. Kale rode with her to the hospital. My grip tightened around the ceramic mug in my hands. Is she okay? I think so. Word spreading around campus. People are whispering that she's pregnant. I stared out at the rain streaking down my window. My chest ached in that complicated, painful way. I wasn't thinking about the grown-up Silas I'd raised for 30 years in my past life. I was thinking about that tiny, unborn child growing inside Lila. A baby completely innocent of every secret plan two adults were hatching around him. Alara, I'm here. Do you want me to dig around and find out exactly what's going on? Maya offered. No. Are you 100% sure? I'm sure. Maya's eyebrows drew together in confusion. If Kale's mixed up in all this, then that's their burden to carry. She studied my face through the screen. You sound like you already knew. I knew enough. I chose not to unpack every detail for her, not yet. Once our call finished, I took a long, solitary walk alongside the Copenhagen harbor. The cold wind stung against my cheeks. I thought about the version of myself from my first life. That woman had taken on raising this child without ever hearing a single shred of the truth. My love for Silas had been completely real. Even now, across two separate timelines, that strange, tender affection lingered inside of me. But loving a child does not equal consent to being tricked into motherhood. His birth parents were both alive in this world. They had choices to make. And they were going to have to live with whatever choices they made. Once winter break rolled around, Lila's pregnancy became impossible to hide any longer. I found out before Kale ever bothered to call and tell me our university's anonymous gossip social media account posted a blurry photo. It captured Lila walking out of a medical building, wrapped in a loose maternity coat. The caption was cruel, full of gossip and guesswork. They deleted the post within an hour, but by then half the business school had already seen and saved it. Maya sent me a screenshot with nothing but a short note. You deserve to know. I didn't fire off a reply right away. An hour later, my phone started ringing. It was Kale. I was sitting inside a conference room at Vestergaard Capital, waiting for a senior analyst to bring over revised portfolio data. I hit decline. He called again and again. Finally, I shot him a short text message. I'm working. Is this an emergency? His reply popped up instantly. Yes. I stepped out into the hallway and called him back. His voice sounded rough and worn-thin. Alara. What's happened? Lila's pregnant. He said it in the exact tone you would use to report a terrible natural disaster. Silence hung over the call. News traveled fast around campus and he knew it. I waited. This was another old habit of his. He would sit quiet, hoping the pressure of the silence would push me to ask all the questions he wanted to answer. Are you all right? Who is the father? What are you going to do instead? I said plainly. I've got about 5 minutes before I need to get back to work. Alara, hold on. Don't jump to conclusions before I explain. My heartbeat stayed steady. Then explain. The baby's father isn't in the picture, he lied straight to my face. She's terrified. Her parents are furious with her. She might need to take time away from school. That sounds incredibly hard for her. It is. Another long pause. What exactly are you hoping to get from me, Kale? He let out a heavy breath. Nothing. I just didn't want you hearing this story secondhand from random campus gossip. I almost admired how clever that line was. He acted like he was doing me a courtesy, when in reality everyone already knew. I've heard it now. Alara, you're acting so strange. No. I'm getting involved exactly as much as I choose to be. He flinched, even separated by 6 whole time zones. You know Lila is my close friend. I know. I'm going to help her through this. Then go ahead and help her. Aren't you bothered by this at all? There it was. He wanted my permission. Not genuine moral approval. Strategic permission. If I pushed back, he could paint me as jealous and bitter. If I went along, later he could claim I'd known and accepted his role in Lila's pregnancy all along. I understood every trick he had. I don't get a vote over who you choose to help, I told him. But your choices are yours. Don't drag my name into any of this. His expression hardened. Is that really what you think of me? I didn't say that. I said don't tie me to your decisions. I need to go back in. Alara, wait. When are you planning on coming home? My exchange wraps up in June. That's still 5 months away. Can't you finish your program remotely? Haven't even considered it. You haven't even asked if it's possible. I don't want to. That response caught him completely off guard. He stared through the camera lens. I thought we were trying to make this relationship work. We are testing whether this relationship can survive without one person constantly giving up everything they want. He had nothing to say to that. I ended our call. By March, Lila had moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment close to campus. Her parents held very traditional views and cared a great deal about their family reputation. They agreed to cover part of her rent, but refused to let her move back home. Kale started spending many nights over at her place. To all our mutual friends, his story stayed the same. He was just helping a friend who had nobody else to lean on. It seemed like nobody stopped to ask why he specifically was the only person responsible for supporting her. Or maybe people did ask and he was just very good at lying in person. Back in Copenhagen, my own life grew fuller by the week. Vestergaard assigned me a project focused on consumer credit risk for small cross-border lending firms. The work wasn't glamorous. Most days were spent cleaning messy datasets, wading through dense regulatory text, and discovering that even people who called themselves innovative industry experts still stored critical information inside spreadsheets named final_v7_real. I loved it. I wasn't magically brilliant at it. I made real mistakes. Once I misread a Danish reporting standard and had to redo 2 full days' worth of work. During my very first presentation in front of senior analysts, my hands shook and I spoke far too quickly out of nerves. One midnight, I sent Alex a text message, spiraling and wondering if I was completely incompetent. 15 minutes later he wrote back, "No, you're just burnt out. Those spreadsheets and numbers will still be there tomorrow." That short message made me cry. Not because it was romantic, No one had ever told me before that my work could wait. Without also implying I was letting somebody important down. I started sleeping proper hours. Every morning I went running along the city lakes. I bought myself a bright red winter coat just because I loved how it looked. Once, Kale had told me red made me come across as too intense. I stopped adjusting my whole daily schedule to line up with Boston's time zone. And then Lila gave birth. She went into labor 3 weeks early. Maya called me while I was eating breakfast. "It's a little boy." My spoon slipped right out of my hand, clattering against my bowl. "What?" "She gave birth last night." Kale was there in the delivery room. I closed my eyes for a split second. Memories flooded over me. The sharp smell of baby shampoo. Silas at 4 years old, asleep on my chest because he refused to nap anywhere else. 10-year-old Silas in our kitchen, his science fair volcano erupting sideways, splattering gunk all over the ceiling. 27-year-old Silas introducing me to the woman he planned to marry. My throat tightened up. "What's his name?" I asked quietly. Maya sounded surprised. "Noah, of course." I pressed one hand tight over my mouth. "Ilara? You don't sound okay." Fine. There's just a lot hitting me all at once." "Do you want to tell me everything that's going on now?" "Soon." Once we hung up, I headed off to class. I sat through 90 full minutes of a lecture on international corporate governance. I scribbled down 8 full pages of notes, even though later I could barely remember writing a single word of them. After class, I locked myself inside a bathroom stall and cried until my chest ached. I wasn't mourning a baby I'd lost. This Noah wasn't mine. But the Noah I'd raised for 30 years, that boy had been mine, in every way that mattered except blood. Even when the origin story was built on lies, love doesn't just vanish. That was the cruelest piece of all. I cared deeply for a person who, in this timeline, had never met me, and might never get the chance to. I wiped the tears off my face and walked back toward campus. Alex spotted me outside the library. He slowed his steps. "Rough day." "Yeah. Want some company?" My automatic reflex was to say no. Then I paused. "I would." We walked side by side for 20 minutes, no words passing between us. He didn't push me to explain my pain. He didn't try to comfort me with physical touch. We crossed a small bridge over one of the city's canals. Eventually I spoke. "Someone I once loved was just born into the world yesterday." Alex looked over at me. That sounds unbelievably complicated." "It is. Do you want to talk through it?" "Not yet." "All right." That was all. No demands. No het pride. No punishment for keeping parts of myself private and unshared. Thousands of miles away in Boston, Kale and Lila were learning a lesson I'd already learned decades before. A baby isn't some abstract idea. It isn't a speech about morals. It isn't a pretty social media photo or a promise whispered in a dorm room. A newborn wakes up every 2 hours around the clock. A baby needs feeding, endless piles of laundry, doctor's appointments, insurance paperwork, constant soothing diapers. And it demands at least one person who can keep functioning on almost zero sleep. Lila had planned to go back to her university classes only 3 weeks after giving birth. She only lasted 4 days. Kale had planned to keep attending all his job recruiting interviews. He missed 2 of them. His parents agreed to babysit only on Sunday afternoons. That was the full extent of their help. A full-time nanny cost far more money than either Kale or Lila made. The daycare centers that could take a premature infant had impossibly long waitlists. Lila's mom sent money, but refused to travel to Boston to help out in person. By the end of Noah's 2nd week of life, Kale called my phone 11 times in one single day. I finally picked up on the 12th attempt. "Is somebody dying?" He sounded offended by my opening line. "No, of course not." "Then why 11 missed calls?" "I needed to talk to you about." He glanced nervously over his shoulder. Somewhere in the background, a baby started crying. When he realized I could hear that sound, all the color drained out of his face. I didn't react at all. He muted his phone for several seconds. When he came back on the line, he tried to brush it off. "Sorry, that's the neighbor's baby. Thin apartment walls." His eyes searched my face through the screen. "Ilara, have you ever thought about coming home before June?" "No. What if I really need you?" Those words slipped out before he could stop himself. I leaned back in my office chair. There it was. Not I miss you. Not I love you. What if I need you? You'll work something out. I told him flatly. His expression shifted. Neither one of us needed to say out loud how familiar that exact phrase was. By April, Cale's calls had settled into a predictable pattern. He never said Noah's name directly. Instead, he rambled about how exhausted he was. He brought up family troubles. He talked about a friend who was overwhelmed and desperate for support. He complained about how hard it was juggling senior year recruiting and all these unexpected new responsibilities. Every single conversation inched closer to the request. He still didn't dare speak out loud. Come home. Fix this. Be useful for us again. I decided I wouldn't wait for him to work up the courage to ask. We'd been together for 3 years. Even knowing every terrible secret he kept, I didn't want to bring our history to an end with nothing more than a cold text message. So one Sunday evening I gave him a call. For once he picked up from his own apartment. No baby cries echoed in the background. You called me, he said, a flicker of relief in his voice. I did. I was starting to think you'd forgotten my phone number. I need to talk to you about something serious. His smile faded away. About us. He sat up straighter in his chair. I'd rehearsed a big fiery angry speech. But when this real moment arrived, anger felt wrong. Anger would open the door for negotiation. I was not here to negotiate anything. I'm ending our relationship. He gave one short, disbelieving laugh. Not because it was funny, but because his mind refused to process those words. What? I'm breaking up with you, Cale. Alara, you can't mean this. You're burnt out. You're living in another country. You're swamped with work, and we've barely seen each other. I'm not burnt out. You sound like a completely different person. I feel more like myself than I have in years. His features hardened. Is this because of Alex? I'd only mentioned Alex a couple of times in group context conversations. But jealousy sharpened a person's memory in a way genuine love often didn't. No, it's nothing to do with him. How am I supposed to believe that? Because it's the truth. Then what changed? I looked at the man I had once planned to marry. All of that pain, the secret pregnancy, the child, 30 years of lies, my death. All of those events belong to another timeline. But I didn't need those memories to justify my choice in this reality. I've realized I hate the person I turn into when I'm with you. I'm constantly adjusting myself, waiting around, helping you out, making myself always available for whatever you need. Once I stopped doing all of those things, I saw how much of our whole relationship relied entirely on my endless giving. That's ridiculous. Relationships demand compromise from both sides. Compromise means both people give up something, not just one. I've sacrificed plenty for you. I'm not keeping score. Well, you clearly are. No. I'm just choosing to walk away from this whole game. He shot up to his feet so fast his laptop camera shook. You can't break up with me over a video call. This isn't right. I'm in Denmark. Then wait until you fly home to Boston. No, why not? Because by June, Lila will be desperate to get back to her career. You will have gained 2 more months to build more lies. Because that Alara who waited for your convenience died on a hospital bed. And I don't need your permission to end a romantic relationship. He stared at me. When he lost control of a situation, Cale always fell back on soft, tender words. Ellie. That old nickname still managed to tug at something tender deep inside of me. Even after everything, we've loved each other since we were 18. I know. We talked about getting married one day. I know. You told me you wanted to have kids together. My heart lurched. He could never grasp how cruelly those words landed. I know. So we hit one rough stretch, and you're just done with everything? This isn't only about one bad year. Then tell me what this is really about. I almost spilled everything right then. But I held back. It's about finally understanding I can get out before everything gets even worse. Silence. Then, off camera, a baby started crying. Cale froze. There was no mistaking that sound. I watched him struggle to decide what lie to tell. He muted his microphone. He stepped out of camera view for almost a full minute. When he came back, his hair was messy, and there was a damp wet stain across the shoulder of his t-shirt. It's the neighbor's kid, he mumbled. I looked straight at him. Goodbye, Cale. I hung up. He called right back. I declined. Again and again. Texts poured onto my screen. What do you think you know, Alara? Answer me. This is insane. We can fix all of this. I turned all my phone notifications off. My hands shook for a full hour. Ending things didn't feel like victory. It felt like cutting away a piece of myself that had become infected. I sat down on the floor of my dorm room and cried. Eventually Maya called. That night I told her everything I safely could in this life. I couldn't talk about rebirth, or 30 long years I'd lived in another world, but I shared enough. I told her I was convinced Kale was Noah's biological father. I explained how Kale and Lila had plotted for me to give up that Copenhagen spot, so Lila could hide her pregnancy overseas. Maya sat quiet, stunned, listening to every word. Are you absolutely certain? I'm sure in my heart. I don't have hard proof to publicly accuse them in front of everyone. Do you want me to go confront Kale? Or Lila? No. Don't do that. Then what exactly are you going to do next? I wiped the tears off my cheeks. Nothing. Maya blinked in shock. Nothing. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to work my job. I will pay my rent. I will visit museums. I will keep learning terrible, broken Danish. They get to raise their own child. A slow smile spread across her face. Oh wow. That's brutal. I laughed through my leftover tears. It's not meant to be cruel, but that's exactly what happens when they were counting on me to solve their mess. I didn't destroy their plan. I simply removed the person they had planned to sacrifice. Everything else collapses under its own weight. Kale waited 9 whole days before reaching out again. His first messages were full of rage. Then came apologies. Then he sent an old photo of us back from freshman year. After that, radio silence for close to 2 weeks. That quiet made me uneasy. I knew Kale very well. When he fell silent, it never meant he'd accepted defeat. It meant he was cooking up a new strategy. That strategy finally arrived through a phone call in early May. I was sitting at my desk in the Vestergaard office. Most of the office had gone home for the day. It was past 7 o'clock at night. Alara, please don't hang up on me.
I'm listening.
There is something I need to tell you. For one split second my breath caught in my throat. He was pulling out that same old lie decades earlier than he had in my first life. Daniel Brooks was Kale's old friend from the University Economics Club. Back in my past life, Kale told me a whole elaborate story. Daniel and his wife died in a terrible highway crash after graduation. Rain-slick roads, a drunk driver, 0 surviving family members willing to take in baby Noah. All of that was a complete fabrication. In this timeline, Daniel was 22 years old, alive, unmarried, buried under statistics exam study materials over in Cambridge. I'd messaged him 2 weeks before on purpose. Not to trap Kale, but to make sure that trap could never close around my future again. Daniel had been surprised, but friendly. We'd exchanged a few messages about job recruiting. He mentioned accepting a position in New York City starting July. Now Kale spoke over the phone. Daniel's in really bad trouble. I closed my eyes. What sort of trouble? It's complicated. Of course it was. He's got a baby boy. The sheer arrogance of that line almost made me laugh out loud. Kale rushed to keep talking. The baby's mother isn't part of their lives anymore. He's completely overwhelmed. His family can't offer much support. I've been trying my best to help him get through this. Daniel has a baby? Yeah. What's the baby's name? A noticeable pause. Noah. My fingernails dug lightly into the palm of my hand. Interesting. I spoke to Daniel yesterday. The silence on the other end was total. This was not the confused silence of someone hearing a misunderstanding. This was the silence of a man watching the floor drop right out from underneath his feet. You what? I messaged Daniel. He congratulated me on my internship placement. How would he even know about that?
A linkage exists.
Kale said nothing. I kept going. He also told me he's moving to New York City this coming July. He never mentioned having a child. Alara. Whose baby is Noah, Kale? His breath came sharp and fast through the phone speaker. What exactly do you know? That single question told me everything. An innocent man would immediately cry misunderstanding. A trapped man only wants to figure out exactly how much evidence you hold against him. Enough. Enough for what? Enough to know I will not be raising another person's child. I never asked you to do that. But you were about to try. That's completely insane. Then there is nothing left for us to argue over. Alara, wait. You can't just throw accusations around and hang up. I'm not making accusations. I'm drawing a hard boundary. Your acting like a baby is nothing more than some heavy burden. My temper finally snapped. He is a child, which means he needs his actual parents to step up for him. If you care about him so deeply, then be one of those parents. He went completely quiet. I didn't even need to say the word father out loud. The message landed crystal clear. Alara. His voice shifted. Who told you all of this? Was it Lila? That thought almost made me laugh. I ended the phone call. 30 minutes later, I got a message from Lila, her first contact in months. Can we talk? Woman to woman. I stared down at the screen. I typed my reply. No, 3 little dots popped up, showing she was typing a response. Please, you don't understand everything we're going through. I chose every word carefully as I wrote back. Take this up with the people who are actually involved in your situation. Not me. Her reply shot back instantly. You think you're so much better than everyone just because you ran away to Europe. I deleted her message without responding. The next morning, my supervisor Ingrid Larson called me into her office at Vestergaard. She was in her 40s, and she could silence a room full of senior bankers just by asking them to explain their own assumptions. She closed the office door behind us. I've got an opportunity to present to you. My stomach tightened. What kind of opportunity? Our firm is opening a new London-based analyst cohort next year. Normally we hire fresh graduates through our standard recruiting process. But Professor Nygaard has pushed for you to get early consideration. I read over the packet she pushed across her desk. Back in my old life, I turned down a great post-grad job offer in New York because Cale got an offer in Boston. Then I'd passed on Chicago, Toronto, one chance after another. Every opportunity was weighed against whether it would create inconvenience for other people. When would I need to give them my answer? I asked, only once you finish your formal interviews. This is no guarantee. I understand fully. Then go ahead and apply. I looked down at that stack of papers. Once upon another lifetime, I would have immediately wondered how Cale would react before I thought about what I wanted. Now only one thought circled in my mind, I really want this. So I sent in my application. I landed the London role in June. That email popped into my inbox while Alex and I were eating lunch on the stone steps outside the business school building. I read it once, then a second time, then a third. Alex glanced over my shoulder. Good news? I handed my phone over to him. He scanned the opening paragraph and broke into a wide grin. You got it. I got it. He passed the device back into my hands. That was all. No questions about what this meant for us because there was no us, yet. He didn't try to twist my achievement around to fit his own plans. No warnings about how expensive London would be, or how lonely I might feel. Just genuine, uncomplicated congratulations. It took me several heartbeats to realize I'd been waiting for some hidden catch that never actually showed up. The job would start right after graduation. Vestergaard's London office would sponsor my work visa. I'd get formal analyst training, rotating across cross-border credit work and regulatory strategy. It was better than the first job I'd accepted in my past life. Not purely because of higher pay. What made it priceless was this. It belonged entirely to me. I called my father first. He shouted so loud I had to hold my phone away from my ear. London. Actual London. Yep. Complete with those famous red double-decker buses. I hope you're ready for all that rain. I laughed. Next I called Maya, then Professor Nygaard. I never reached out to Cale. But he found out anyway. My LinkedIn post had barely been live for an hour when his message popped up. London. I stared at that single word. Then he wrote again. Call me. I ignored it. 10 minutes went by. Another text arrived. You said you'd come home once your exchange wrapped up. Finally I typed back. Plans have changed. He called right away. This time I picked up. Curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to see which brand of entitlement he would lean into this time. You accepted a job in London? That's right. And you didn't even tell me ahead of time? We're not together anymore. That's beside the point. I huffed a faint, tired smile. That was his favorite line. Then what is the point? You're moving your whole life overseas just like that. It's a job opportunity. Do you even know if you'll like living in London? Before college, I didn't know if I would like Boston either. This is totally different. He trailed off mid-sentence. Deep down he'd still clung to the belief that our breakup wasn't real. He kept waiting for me to fly back and fall right back into our old routine. You expected me to come home. I said plainly that he avoided looking straight into the camera lens. You were angry. I was crystal clear. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt. I wasn't making threats, Kale. I ended our relationship. We could still fix everything. No. Then why are you doing this? There was real desperation in his voice that part of me ached to tell him. Because in another life I gave you 30 years of mine. But those memories were mine alone. Instead I said, because I want this job. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. So that's all it comes down to? A job is more important than us. No. There is no us to weigh against a career. His face went rigid. In the background a baby screamed. This time he couldn't hit mute fast enough. I heard Lila's voice rise in frustration. Kale, can you take him? I'm on the phone. Well, do I have to grow an extra pair of arms? Give me 5 minutes. You already said that 20 minutes ago. Kale muted himself. I sat there, watching their silent argument unfold on screen. For half a second Lila stepped into frame. Her hair was greasy. Dark exhaustion etched itself under her eyes. A burp cloth was slung over one shoulder, and she was holding Noah. That boy, my Noah, yet not my Noah. Small, red-faced, alive and breathing. A sharp, heavy grief twisted in my chest. Then Kale shifted the camera, and Noah vanished out of view. Kale unmuted. Sorry about that. Don't apologize to me. Alara, we need help. There it was. At long last. No more disguises. No made-up stories about Daniel. No vague references to a struggling friend. Plain and simple, we need help. I studied him across the time zones. Then hire help. We can't afford full-time childcare. Then rearrange your schedules. Lila still has university classes to finish. And so do you. I've got job interviews lined up. She also has interviews to go to. Then one of you has to give something up. His eyes widened in shocked. Alara, you know how hard that is. I almost pitied him. I knew exactly how hard it was. For decades in my first life, I'd rearranged everything. My schedule, my career goals, my sleep, my whole identity. Now they had a child, and they were stunned to learn caring for him demanded somebody sacrifice their time to... Could you come back for the summer? Kale begged at a no. Just until daycare has an opening. No, you won't even think about it? I already thought it all through. But he's innocent. Those words squeezed tight around my ribs. He is innocent. Precisely why his parents ought to stop treating him like some scheduling hassle they want to hand off to someone else. Kale flinched hard. I am not his mother. I'm not your ex-girlfriend waiting to clean up your mess. I am not Lila's backup plan. Who told you he's my son? The second those words left his mouth, he'd given himself away. He didn't need a confession. The panic written across his face said everything that I didn't smirk. There was no joy in this moment. You just told me. He closed his eyes. Alara, I can explain. I'm sure you can. It wasn't supposed to turn out like this. The pregnancy, I mean. What about the plan to invent a fake story about Daniel's baby? What about when you pushed me to reject Copenhagen while Lila was already carrying your child? Every drop of color drained out of his face. That was the wound he never imagined I could uncover. How could you possibly know about that? I know more than enough. Did Lila tell you? Quit asking me that. Does it even matter where you heard it? It matters because you tried to manipulate my future to fix your secret. That's not how it went down. Then tell me how it went. He opened his mouth but no words came out. Finally he whispered, I didn't know what else to do. And so you decided what I should do for you without ever asking me. That isn't fair. No, I said quietly. It truly wasn't. I ended the video call. My hands shook for a long time afterward. An hour later, Alex found me sitting in the common room of the student residence. You look like you just won a lawsuit, but you hate every single second of the victory. I gave a weak, tired laugh. Something along those lines. He sat down across the table. There. No, food. Not right now. Want a distraction? I looked up at him. Yes. He pulled his laptop open. I've got 17 slides walking through Nordic Bank liquidity rules. That's not a distraction. That's mental torture. It's all I've got handy. I laughed. He smiled gently. And in that moment, after facing Cale's lies, I understood one simple truth. My life didn't need to grind to a halt just because his life had fallen apart. The world kept turning. And so would I. 3 days later, Lila reached out directly. Not via text. A formal email landed in my inbox. Subject line. We need to handle this like adults. Just reading that heading told me she'd spent hours drafting and rewriting every line. Her message sounded polished and reasonable. She apologized for all the secrecy. She wrote that Noah deserved stability. She claimed Cale had always still loved me. Their affair, she said, had just been a mistake that spiraled out of control once pregnancy entered the picture. She insisted she had never meant to hurt me. Then, buried deep inside the 7th paragraph, came her real request. She wanted me to consider moving back to Boston, not for her sake, but for Noah's. She wrote that I'd always been far more nurturing than she could ever be. Cale and I had once talked of marriage. Maybe the 4 of us could build some unconventional living setup, so Noah could benefit from as much loving support as possible. I read that paragraph twice. The greatest possible circle of love. What she really wanted was a co-parent. Someone who demanded no legal rights, no pay, no public recognition. Someone she could exploit, all wrapped in soft therapy speak. I waited until evening to write my reply. Lila. Noah deserves parents willing to take full responsibility for the life they brought into this world. I am not one of those parents. Do not reach out to me again about childcare, custody, or my history with Cale. Elara. Her reply arrived 11 minutes later. You're punishing an innocent baby out of anger toward us. Back in my first life, I would have written paragraphs trying to defend myself. This time I answered plainly. I'm simply refusing to take on a burden that was never mine to carry. She called me. I almost ignored it. But 30 years of sitting across dinner tables, smiling politely at her, weighed on me. I picked up. Her face filled my screen. She looked better than she had in Cale's video call, makeup covering the worst of her exhaustion. Do you honestly think you can just walk away from all of this? Yes. He's a real human child, Elara. I know he is. You speak about him like he's some corporate liability you can offload. No. I'm saying you are his mother. Her jaw tightened. Does biology automatically make you a good mother? Biology alone doesn't. But choosing to bring a child into the world creates obligations you can't pass off just because they are inconvenient. You have no idea what that pregnancy put my body through. You're right. I don't. But I never forced you into that pregnancy either. You were always so wonderful with kids. When you got pregnant, I was 21. Nobody knew what kind of mother I might or might not turn out to be. Cale assumed. I cut her off. Your whole plan was built on my reputation for being kind, not my actual consent. I worked so hard for my career, Lila said, her voice cracking. I can't just vanish for years to raise a baby. So do I want a career. You don't have a baby holding you back. Exactly. Her eyes flashed. That's cruel. It's just factual. She stood and started pacing while holding her phone. Did I ask for any of this? Did I plan on getting pregnant? I don't think you planned it. Then stop treating me like I deserve punishment. I'm not trying to punish you. Then help me. No, that single word hung heavy between us. She stopped pacing. Back in my old life, I would have kept explaining, kept negotiating until she found some crack to push through. This time one sharp answer was enough. Cale still loves you. That's his problem to work through. He wants to marry you. Also his problem. For the first time she sounded genuinely wounded. He doesn't want me. A flicker of pity stirred inside my chest. Then I remembered that line from my hospital deathbed. I was willing to give birth to him. I was never willing to raise him. And yet she'd still chosen to sleep with my boyfriend and conceive that child. That's complicated, she mumbled. It became complicated afterward. The beginning was simple. You slept with a man who was my partner. He slept with you. You got pregnant. Every hardship after that is just logistics. She paled. You don't need to act so self-righteous. I'm not being self-righteous. I'm just stating facts. Has living in Europe changed you this much? It has. Kale says you used to be so warm. I almost laughed out loud. I'm still warm. I'm just no longer available to clean up other people's messes. Lila ended the call abruptly. The week after that, Lila filed official court paperwork for child support. Maya passed along what she'd heard. Kale refused to sign a private settlement Lila's lawyer had drafted. He wanted shared custody, yet he'd accepted a job that required extremely long working hours. Lila wanted steady financial support without taking primary day-to-day care of Noah. Kale wanted the exact opposite. Their secret informal arrangement crashed hard against reality, once legal documents forced them to name who would actually look after the little boy. That was when they began to resent each other. Not because either of them had fundamentally changed. It was because for the first time, they couldn't dump all their burdens onto me. Northbridge University held its graduation ceremony, but I didn't go. My exchange credits let me finish all remaining coursework remotely. I flew back to Boston only for 1 week at the end of summer. I came to collect my belongings, spend time with my dad, and close out the old dorm lease I'd once shared with Kale. I thought about attending the formal graduation. Then I realized I didn't need another symbolic closing moment. My new life had already started thousands of miles away. Boston felt smaller when I stepped off the plane. Not physically, emotionally. Places that once felt like the whole center of my world were just ordinary city streets now. The coffee shop where Kale had kissed me for the very first time. The park bench where we'd sworn we could survive anything together. The lobby of the business school where Lila had asked about my Copenhagen decision. I walked past every one of those spots. Memories lingered, but they no longer held power over me. Kale was waiting for me outside my old dorm building. Of course he was. 6 months had altered him. He was thinner. The easy, confident charm had faded. Tension permanently lined the corners of his mouth. For a split second I saw the man he would become in my first life at 45, worn down after brutal quarters at work. But I reminded myself, exhaustion is not repentance. Alara. Kale. I've been trying to get a chance to talk to you. I know. Can we grab coffee? Just 10 minutes. I've got an appointment. With who? I just looked steadily at him. He sighed and dropped that line. Right. None of my business. That was something new. He pulled out a small velvet ring box. My stomach twisted. Don't. I warned him. You haven't even seen it yet. I know what rings that size are for. Alara, please. Other students moved around us, rolling suitcases. A summer orientation group wandered past holding campus maps. He flipped open the box. Inside sat a diamond engagement ring. In my first timeline, he'd proposed 2 years after graduation, up on a rooftop restaurant. I'd cried happy tears before he'd even finished speaking. This time, everything felt wrong and hollowed. I love you, he said. I truly believed he thought he meant those words. But belief was never enough. I know you made mistakes, he went on. Mistakes. I repeated softly. You cheated on me. You lied about Noah. You tried to pass him off as Daniel's baby. You pushed me to turn down Copenhagen, even when you knew Lila was carrying your child. He flinched with every point I named. Yes, he whispered. I was scared back then. So you planned to shrink my whole life down to solve your fear. I never thought of it like that. That doesn't make it okay. I thought if you stayed, we would have time to sort everything out. We meant you, Lila, and me. You made me part of your solution without ever telling me what the problem was. He stepped closer. I never intended for you to raise him all on your own. I let out a short, bitter laugh. What exactly was your grand plan then? Someday we would get married, and Noah would become part of our family. How? I pressed. Would Lila have given up full custody? Would you have told me he was your son eventually? When? Before I turned down promotions for him? Or after I'd already sacrificed too much to walk away. Stop, he said, voice cracking. Before or after I was too attached to leave? People nearby started glancing over. Cale lowered his voice. I know how terrible it sounds. No. You finally understand what it actually was. He snapped the ring box shut. I'm trying to make amends, asking you to marry me. I can give you everything you ever wanted. That sentence made my heart ache. He still imagined this was all about material gifts he could hand over. It was never about what you could give me. It was about what you were willing to take from me. He winced. I can change. I hope you do. For you. No. Not for me. Alara, don't throw away everything we had over one terrible year. I stared at him for a long moment. You didn't lose me in this one bad year. When did I lose you? I couldn't tell him about my past life death. So I spoke the truth of this timeline. The moment you looked at that Copenhagen offer and saw a way out for your mess, instead of seeing my big chance. His eyes welled up. He reached for my hand. I stepped backward. Is this because of Alex? No. Do you love him? I don't know yet. Then why pick London over me? I gave him a faint, sad smile. I'm not picking London over you. I'm picking myself. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing on that sidewalk clutching an engagement ring that had once represented my whole imagined future. 3 weeks later, I boarded my flight and moved to London. London proved far harder than Copenhagen had been. Copenhagen felt like a temporary pause, a place where everyone knew their stay would end. London demanded grit. Rent was punishingly expensive. Commutes were crowded and draining. My job moved faster. It was sharp, unforgiving. During my very first month there, I messed up a section of a regulatory memo. My whole team had to redo part of a client presentation. I apologized, fixed every error, and spent the entire weekend convinced I would get fired. Monday morning my manager pulled me aside. Don't repeat that mistake. Then she assigned me brand new work. That small act of reasonable mercy shifted something deep in me. In my first life, every error felt like proof I needed to push myself harder for everyone else. Now I learned competence included owning missteps and repairing them. Slowly, I built my new life. I rented a tiny flat in Islington, with terrible water pressure, and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. I joined a Saturday morning running club. I tracked down a grocery shop that sold the peanut butter my dad loved, and mailed him 2 jars for Christmas as a silly little joke. That I learned to stop answering work emails at midnight. I learned to sit down for dinner without checking whether somebody else had eaten already. 6 months later, Alex moved to London to take a research position. He told me only after he'd formally accepted the role. When we met for coffee, he was straightforward. I don't want you thinking I relocated purely because of you. Was it partially for me? He paused and thought it over. You factored into my decision. But you weren't the sole reason. That should have stung. Instead it felt safe. I'd spent too much of my old life being someone's total justification for major life choices. I never wanted to fill that role again. We grew close as friends long before romance bloomed. Then one rainy night after a client dinner, he walked me back to my apartment building. We stood under the building awning as rain streamed down onto the pavement. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked nervous. I'd like to take you out for dinner. We just finished a work dinner with loan covenant discussions. I know. That was a crowded work event. I'm asking you out on an actual date. My chest tightened. My mind flashed back to Cale's ring, to 30 years of marriage, to the way I'd vanished to meet other people's needs. Alex noticed my expression shift. You can say no. No explanation needed. No pressure. No guilt trip. Those words meant more than any grand romantic declaration ever could. Yes, I told him. Our first real date was at a small Lebanese restaurant. Halfway through the meal, Alex spilled water all over his shirt. Our second date was an art museum. Our third almost never happened. Panic hit me 2 hours before we were supposed to meet. And I messaged saying I was swamped with work. He texted back simply, "No problem. Hope your work goes well." No guilt, no anger. The next morning, overwhelmed with shame, I called him. I admitted I'd lied about work. I got scared. I confessed, scared of me. Scared of how much I'm starting to like you. Would you like to stop seeing each other? No. Then let's just slow everything down. I cried after we hung up. Healing, it turned out, involved a ridiculous amount of crying. Back in Massachusetts, Cale and Lila's custody fight turned ugly. Without me to absorb all their stress, they turned on each other. Lila wanted to move to New York for graduate school. She argued Cale should take primary weekday care of Noah. Cale held his high-hours finance job and said that was impossible. Lila's lawyer demanded formal child support based on his salary. Cale's legal team pushed for documentation about Lila's family money and her projected future income. Private text messages became official court exhibits. Promises got twisted into evidence. Among those public filings, as Maya told me, were messages about me. While Lila was pregnant, she'd written, "Ilara will come back eventually. She always does whatever Cale needs." And Cale had replied, "Once she meets him, she'll love him. That part won't be hard." Maya sent me a screenshot. I had to sit down once I read those lines. I wasn't shocked. Those 2 short sentences laid bare exactly how my first whole life had been stolen. They understood my capacity for love better than I understood their character. They'd planned to use my own kindness as a rope to tie me to their child. This time it didn't work. I saved that screenshot into a private archive folder, then turned back to my work. For nearly 3 years, I had zero direct contact with Cale and Lila. That was entirely intentional. I climbed the ranks at Vestergaard, London. First I worked regulatory strategy, then cross-border portfolio risk. I earned one promotion, then another. I helped build a lending review framework that cut default risks for one tricky client segment. My name appeared on official reports because I'd written them. My work traveled further than I ever had. Alex and I took our time building our relationship. We kept separate apartments for 2 full years. We fought over real, ordinary things. He would disappear for days buried in research work. I carried that old habit. Whenever someone seemed upset, I automatically assumed it fell on me to fix their mood before they even asked for help. Once, after Alex mentioned feeling worn out, I spent an entire weekend replanning our whole trip, rewriting hotel bookings and itineraries. He stopped me halfway through. I said I was tired. "I didn't ask you to redo our whole vacation. I was just trying to help." "I know you were," he said gently. His soft tone made it hurt even more. "What if helping people is how I show that I love them?" I asked. "Then you have to check first whether they want your help." That one simple rule could have changed everything in my first lifetime. So we learned each other deliberately. No mind reading. No playing the martyr. No keeping score disguised as generosity. Then Northbridge University invited me back for our 5-year class reunion. The business school was hosting a panel focused on global careers. Associate Dean Professor Hale asked me to speak about exchange opportunities and international job hunting. My first instinct was to decline. Not because of Cale. I was simply swamped with work. Then Professor Hale wrote to me, "You used that exchange exactly the way our program was intended. Current students deserve to hear your story." I agreed to go. I flew back to Boston alone. Alex had a conference in Zurich. He offered to change his travel plans to join me. I told him not to. "Do you wish I was there?" he asked over the phone. I thought for a moment. "Not right now." "Then I'll see you on Sunday." That was all. The Northbridge campus looked almost identical. Students hurried across the quad clutching coffee cups. That ancient elevator in the business building remained so slow that nearly everyone chose the stairs. The hallway where I'd once held my acceptance folder for Copenhagen still existed. I brushed my fingers against the wall as I walked past. 5 years, an entire other lifetime. The panel itself went smoothly. There were 4 of us speakers: a diplomat, a supply chain executive, a nonprofit director, and me. I spoke about Copenhagen, my internship at Vestergaard, and why early career mobility mattered. During the audience Q&A, one student asked whether chasing overseas opportunities destroyed romantic relationships. A quiet laugh rippled through the room. I smiled. Sometimes distance reveals exactly what a relationship is built on. I answered. It can hurt, but it can also be incredibly clarifying. I never named Cale. I didn't need to. After the panel, alumni gathered in the building's atrium for drinks. That was when I spotted Lila. She wore a cream-colored suit. She still carried that polished, confident aura I remembered from college. But small changes were visible. Fine little lines around her eyes, tension tight in her smile. Her name tag read senior associate at a New York consulting firm. She'd built her career after all. I'd never wished for her to fail professionally. I'd only wanted her to accept her parental responsibilities. Cale stood 20 feet away chatting with old classmates. Time had aged him more than 5 short years should. He still worked in finance, but he'd already switched firms twice. Maya had come just to support me. She leaned close to my ear. Do you want to leave? No, want me to spill wine on both of them? No, Obame. I laughed. I might have gotten through the whole evening without speaking to either of them. If a journalist for the alumni magazine hadn't walked over to interview Lila. The magazine was preparing a feature story about graduates balancing high-pressure careers with parenthood. Someone on the alumni committee had suggested Lila as a perfect interview subject. Lila shone in the spotlight. Within minutes a small crowd circled around her. She talked openly about the struggles young mothers face while finishing school. She spoke about resilience and systemic barriers women run up against in the workplace. All of those things were true on their own, but then she said. For a long stretch I had almost zero support. Noah's father and I were barely out of college. I had to give up an international study opportunity, and rebuilding after that loss took me years. My head turned toward her. Maya muttered beside me. She absolutely did not just say that. The journalist leaned in. Was that the Copenhagen exchange? Lila nodded. Yes. I had prepared to go, but life circumstances shifted. That lie was clever. She never said she'd won the spot. She just let everyone in that room assume it. Professor Hale, who stood nearby, frowned and spoke up. But Alara held the Copenhagen placement that year. A hush rippled outward through the small crowd. Lila's smile stayed fixed in place. I was the first alternate candidate, Lila quickly clarified. Maya folded her arms. Which meant you would only get it if Alara turned it down. Lila shot her a sharp glare. The journalist sensed a real story unfolding. She turned toward me. Alara, did you ever consider rejecting the spot? I could have turned and walked away. Maybe I should have. But I thought of those messages from the custody filings. Alara will come back eventually. She always does whatever Cale needs. Truth didn't require cruelty. But it also didn't demand my silence. Cale asked me to turn it down, I said clearly. Cale across the atrium froze completely still. The journalist raised her eyebrows. Why would he ask you to do that? He claimed long distance would ruin our relationship. I kept my voice even and calm. I later learned Lila was already pregnant with Cale's child at that exact time. No dramatic gasps echoed through the room. Real scandals unfold quietly. Conversations died down one by one. People turned their heads our way. The journalist lowered her recording device. Cale marched across the room toward me. Alara, not here. You're right, this isn't the right place for private family business, I replied. But the university's exchange records are public documents. The International Programs Office can verify dates and ranking. I won't discuss details about Noah beyond what already exists in the public court filings. Lila's eyes blazed. You're enjoying humiliating me. I'm not humiliating you. I answered a question. You knew exactly what you were doing. Maya stepped forward to stand beside me, but I held her back with one light touch on her arm. A former classmate named Jenna spoke from behind Cale. Wait a second. You were dating Alara when Lila got pregnant. Cale said nothing. Jenna looked at Lila. And you were the alternate waiting for Alara's Copenhagen spot? Lila's jaw clenched tight. The timeline assembled itself without me needing to add another word. Facts spoke for themselves. Cale reached out to grab my elbow. I stepped sideways before he could touch my skin. Can we talk somewhere private? No, Gael. His face flushed red. You have no idea how hard these past 5 years have been for us. I looked at him. I think I understand far better than you imagine. Lila laughed bitterly. Of course you do. You got to run away and escape everything. Those words spilled out before she could soften them. Every single person nearby heard that I held her gaze. Yes, I did escape. In that moment I saw the truth she hated most. I hadn't destroyed her life. I'd simply taken my own life back with me when I left. She'd been forced to live with the consequences of her own choices. That the alumni magazine never printed a sensational exposé. Professor Hale stepped in and made it clear a child's private family history shouldn't become material for a university feature article. The final piece focused only on exchange programs and early career paths. Still, word spread fast. Not because I posted anything online, but because dozens of people had stood in that atrium and heard every word. By Monday, old classmates were messaging Maya. By Tuesday, people had dug up the public family court custody filings. By Wednesday, Cale could no longer contain the story that those custody papers made for brutal reading. Lila and Cale each accused the other of dodging hands on parenting work. Text messages, emails, schedules, every promise they'd broken sat there on public record. One exchange in particular became the main topic of campus gossip. Lila, you said Alara would come back and help us once she met Noah. Cale, I thought she would. She always wanted a family. Lila, I can't build my career around daycare drop-offs and pickups. Cale, neither can I. Lila, then what was your original plan? Cale, our whole plan relied on Alara being around. Reading those words didn't bring triumph. It brought quiet vindication. Back in my first life, I'd spent years wondering whether I'd misread everything. Whether grief had made their betrayal feel worse than it truly was. Now I saw written in black and white. They had counted entirely on me to fix their mess. I hadn't imagined it. Cale called me 1 week later. I almost declined. But I wanted to hear if he could finally speak without weaving manipulative strategies. His face appeared on screen. He sat inside what looked like a cheap hotel room. Thank you for picking up.
I'm listening.
I'm not calling to ask anything of you. That was new. He winced. I deserve your skepticism. Maybe you do. I lost my job last month. I hadn't heard that news. I'm sorry to hear that. He looked surprised. I figured you'd be glad. I don't build my happiness around your failures. He stared, then gave a short hollow laugh. That really sounds like you. Though you're barely the person I once knew. That's my own fault, he admitted. He glanced out the hotel window. Officially, my firm didn't fire me over the custody scandal. But I missed so much work last year. Noah had bad respiratory infections. Lila was traveling constantly for work. I kept leaving the office early. The irony burned sharp. In my first life, I'd been the one missing meetings, leaving work early, taking Noah to doctor appointments. Cale had climbed steadily up the career ladder, because another person absorbed every crisis. This time, those crises landed on his shoulders. Is Noah okay now? I asked. Cale's eyes snapped toward me in surprise. Yes. He's fully recovered. Relief washed over me before I could stop it. Cale noticed that you still care about him. I closed my eyes briefly. That isn't the point of this conversation. To me it is. Cale. He is just a child. None of this mess is his fault. His eyes filled. I used to believe once you met him, everything would get better. I thought you would grow to love him. And then you would forgive me. There it was. Not full repentance, but closer than I'd ever gotten before. I thought love would make all the rest unimportant, he said quietly. For you? He nodded slowly. Yes. When Lila told me she was pregnant, she wanted that Copenhagen spot. She planned to go hide overseas, take medical leave, give birth, then come back to school. I stayed silent. She needed your place. I know that. I thought if you stayed in Boston, I could keep you close, while we sorted out what to do with the baby. Those words landed softer than I'd imagined. Yet they still cut deep. And if I'd hit decline, Lila would have gone to Europe. He stared down at his hands. Then afterward, we planned to pretend for a while that Noah belonged to somebody else. Pretend he was Daniel's baby. I know how terrible that sounds. Stop saying that. You know exactly what it was. He swallowed hard. You're right. I never expected those words. They didn't heal my wounds, but at last I heard them. I truly did love you, he said. I believe you meant it. But love doesn't excuse what you did. He looked confused. You loved me, I went on. And still you treated my future like something you could spend to cover up your secret. Both things can be true at the same time. His jaw tightened. I was 22. So was I. That ended his excuse. After a long pause he spoke again. Lila and I barely talk now. We only communicate through a co-parenting app. Noah splits his weeks between our two homes. That's better than fighting in front of him. She blames me for everything. I blame her sometimes. And sometimes he looked me straight in the eye. I know exactly what I did wrong. I'd waited an entire extra lifetime to hear that admission. When it finally arrived, it didn't feel satisfying. I no longer needed his apology to validate my own experience. Good. I said simply. His face crumpled a little. Is that all you can say? What else do you want me to give you? I don't know. That's the first honest thing you've said tonight. He gave a weak laugh. Then he asked, Are you happy? I glanced around my London flat. Alex had moved in 6 months earlier. His books were stacked messily on the shelf. My running shoes sat by the front door. A houseplant we always forgot to water leaned near the window. Yes. I'm happy. With Alex. Yes. Cale closed his eyes. I used to tell myself you left purely because of him. I know. It made it easier. Because if he stole you away, then I didn't have to face the truth that I drove you away myself. I said nothing. I'm sorry. He repeated that I believed that apology had arrived far too late to fix anything for us. I hope you learn to be someone Noah can rely on. Then I ended the video call. I didn't cry afterward. That told me his remorse no longer held power over me. 2 months after the alumni event, Lila reached out to me through LinkedIn. That choice felt absurdly formal. I almost deleted the message without reading it. But the final line caught my eye. I'm not asking you to help with Noah. I just want to say something I should have said years ago. I agreed to meet her for 20 minutes in the lobby cafe of my hotel on my next trip back to Boston. She arrived early. Once upon a time, Lila could walk into any room and command attention, even when exhausted or angry. At 30 years old, she still carried that polished composure. But now I could see all the effort underneath. The carefully selected blouse, perfectly styled hair, controlled breathing to hide her inner tension. She sat down across my table. Thank you for agreeing to meet. You said 20 minutes. Her mouth twitched into a faint smile, still as efficient as ever. I used to not be. We ordered coffee. For a stretch of time neither of us spoke. Then Lila leaned forward. I'm going to say this without making excuses for myself. That would be new, I replied as she nodded, accepting my sharpness. I knew you were ranked first for Copenhagen. I knew I would only get the spot if you turned it down. And I knew Cale intended to pressure you to give it up. No shock hit me, only dull confirmation. Did you ask him to push me? Yes. That honesty stung far deeper than denial ever could. Why? I was terrified. Terrified my family would find out I was pregnant. Terrified the whole university would learn. Terrified I would ruin the career I'd worked so hard to build. I didn't want to become a cautionary tale before I even turned 22. So I was supposed to become that cautionary tale instead. She flinched. I didn't think about you at all. That's probably the most accurate thing you've ever said. We sat with that truth hanging heavy between us. I thought I could go to Europe, have Noah, recover, finish my degree and come home, she told me. Cale kept promising he'd handle everything else. Everything else meant me. Eventually, yes. Did you imagine I would know he was the baby's father? At first, yes. Then Cale said it would be simpler if you never found out. My fingers squeezed tight around my paper coffee cup. Simpler for who? Lila let out a bitter laugh. He never spelled it out. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. And still she'd gone along with their plan. When you accepted the Copenhagen spot, I hated you, she admitted. I could tell. I thought you'd destroyed my escape route. I only took what was rightfully mine. I understand that now. Deep down I knew it even back then. A server walked past our table. Lila waited until we were alone again. That first year raising Noah was the hardest year of my whole life. I was angry all the time, angry at Cale, angry at my parents, sometimes even angry at Noah. Her eyes glistened. She looked ashamed to admit that out loud. There were nights he would not stop crying. I would stand in my kitchen thinking, this was never supposed to be my life. I recognized that exact line from the court documents. And then I realized the person I resented most was you. Me. Because you were over in Europe living exactly the life I wanted for myself. I stared across the table at her. I know how ugly that feeling is, she said. It is ugly. Intellectually, I understood your choices. But accepting the cost of my own mistakes was something different entirely. Those words were the most genuine thing Lila had ever said to me. I thought back to my first life. How many hard truths had I known in my head, but refused to accept emotionally, because accepting them meant I would need to walk away from Kale. Lila took a deep breath. I am sorry. Sorry for sleeping with Kale. Sorry for plotting over that exchange spot. Sorry I expected you to take on a life I was too afraid to live myself. Sorry for those cruel messages in the custody filings. Sorry I accused you of punishing Noah, when you were only refusing to take my place. Her voice cracked on those last few words, that I let the silence linger. Her apology didn't erase all the damage done. But it was real. That I do love him, she said, speaking of Noah. For a long time I was scared I never would. I believe you. He's funny. Stubborn. He argues every single instruction like he's billing by the hour. A smile tugged at my lips. That description sounded exactly like the boy I'd raised in my other life. Lila noticed my reaction. What was that smile about? Nothing. Just sounds like a great kid. She let it drop. I spent years convincing myself you were the one who'd wronged us, she said. But you didn't do anything to us. You just left. That's all it took to unravel everything. Lila glanced out the hotel window toward the sidewalk where strangers hurried by. You didn't destroy our plans. You just refused to be our sacrifice. That revealed every flaw in what we'd built. We never became friends. Closure doesn't require reconciliation. Sometimes closure just means naming what really happened. My son has started asking questions about why you are not part of his life. Lila told me. My chest tightened. What have you told him? I told him the truth simplified for a child. That before he was born, his parents hurt someone very deeply. And none of that pain was his fault. That is the right thing to tell him. He asked whether you hate him. I closed my eyes. Please tell him I don't. I already did. He also asks why he never gets to meet you. I braced for another plea to step into his life. But Lila lifted one hand quickly. I'm not asking you to meet him. I just wanted you to know. I told him some people can care about you, yet still don't belong in your world. That was perfect. Our 20 minutes had stretched to 40. Lila stood up from the table. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't. She gave a faint laugh. Goodbye, Alara. Goodbye, Lila. Time kept rolling forward. When I turned 30, I became director of cross-border strategy for Vestergaard. At 32, I moved back to the United States to help open the firm's New York advisory office. Alex relocated with me, accepting a research institute position in Manhattan. Neither of us sacrificed our careers for the other. We planned like mature adults. At 33 we got married in a small ceremony overlooking the water in Maine. My dad cried before I did. Maya gave a speech that included the story of my terrible first taste of pickled herring in Denmark. The officiant had to gently nudge the microphone away from her. That our wedding vows didn't promise we would merge into one person. We promised we would remain two separate people who chose to build a shared life together. That I never had children in this timeline. That choice was mine. For a few years I wondered if I might want kids. Eventually I realized part of that longing belonged to the old future I'd dreamed up back before Noah existed in my first life. Alex and I talked honestly, and we decided our little family was enough for us. I carried no bitterness over that decision. Noah grew up splitting his time between Massachusetts and New York, bouncing between his two parents under the terms of the custody agreement. I only heard updates secondhand through Maya. He was brilliant with math. He hated carrots. At 8 he became obsessed with soccer. At 12 he broke his arm falling off a climbing wall. When Maya told me about that broken arm, I had to sit perfectly still. Some echoes of my old life repeated. Yet so much was different. This Noah had both of his birth parents showing up at the hospital. They argued once in the parking lot outside, but they both were there for him. He had grandparents in his life. Eventually Kale remarried to a teacher named Laura. Lila never married, though she had several long-term relationships. She made partner at her consulting firm in her 40s. Kale rebuilt his career slowly. Neither of them ended up ruined or destitute. Punishment was never my goal. My goal was for them to accept responsibility for the child they brought into the world. When Noah turned 21, an email landed in my inbox. By then I was 54. That number made my head spin. Back in my first life at 54, I'd been busy preparing for Noah's wedding. In this timeline, he was a stranger writing to ask for a meeting. Ms. Carter, I'm sorry to reach out of the blue. My name is Noah Walker. I believe you know who my parents are. I've recently learned parts of what happened before I was born. I read some of the old court records and spoke at length with my dad. I don't want to stir up trouble. There are things I need to understand. And I feel I owe you an apology. If you don't wish to meet, I will fully respect that decision. Noah, I read that email 3 times. I walked into our kitchen where Alex was making coffee. He saw my face. What's wrong? I handed him my phone. He read through the message. Do you want to meet him? I honestly don't know. Then you don't need to decide right away. That was the gift of this life. I always had a choice. No pressure. No obligation. I waited 1 week. Then I sent my reply. Yes, I will meet you. We picked a quiet cafe near Union Square in Manhattan. I arrived early. When he walked through the door, 30 years of memories crashed down over me. He had Kale's height and Lila's gray-green eyes. But the little nervous habit of pushing his hair back off his forehead was exactly the same as the boy I'd raised in my past life. My hands turned cold. He spotted me and paused. Ilara. No one in his whole life had ever called me Mom. That absence stung. Yet it also brought relief. Yes. He sat down across the small table. Neither of us spoke for several long seconds. Then he said exactly what I'd feared and expected. I think I owe you an apology. I shook my head gently. You don't owe me anything. Your parents were the adults making those choices. But I exist because they hurt you. No, I told him. You exist because they made certain decisions. All the pain and lies that followed were their responsibility, not yours. He swallowed hard. My dad told me he truly believed once you met me, you wouldn't be able to walk away. My eyes burned. I know he thought that. That's terrible. Yes, it is. He almost smiled at my blunt honesty. I expected you to defend him. Grown-ups usually do when you talk about their ex-partner to their kid. You're 21. You're still his son. It's possible to love your father and still acknowledge he hurt people deeply. You don't need to pick only one truth. Noah sat quiet for a moment. My mom says you hate her. I don't hate her. For a long time I did. But hating her was easier than accepting I trusted people who didn't deserve my trust. Do you forgive them? That question hung heavy in the air. I don't spend much time thinking about forgiveness these days. Why not? Because I no longer need them to change or apologize for my own life to feel good and whole. He absorbed that thought. Then he asked about Copenhagen. I told him my story without mentioning rebirth. I told him how scared I'd been to leave everything I knew behind. How one single choice opened doors to research work London then New York. How did you find the strength not to stay? He asked. I gave him a sad smile. I wish I had one simple answer for that. He laughed softly. We talked for 2 full hours. He studied urban economics. He loved soccer. He still hated carrots. When he mentioned that detail I nearly cried. What? He asked. Nothing. You just reminded me of someone I used to know. When we stood up to leave, Noah hesitated. Would it be okay if I emailed you sometimes? I looked at this young man I'd once loved as my own son. This time I would never confuse affection with obligation. Yes. If you want to. He smiled. I would like that. We shared one short, careful hug. This was not a mother-son reunion. This was something brand new. Something freely chosen by both of us. And because it was mutual, it felt clean. Epilogue. I kept what was mine the following spring. Northbridge invited me back to speak again. The event was for students considering international exchange programs. The poster outside the auditorium read, Choosing Opportunity, Careers across borders. The room filled with young men and women around 21 or 22 years old. Old enough to believe one romantic decision could define your whole future. Young enough that it still might. I told them about Copenhagen. I told them how close I'd come to rejecting that spot. I never breathed a word about being reborn. Some truths can never fit inside ordinary speech. During Q&A, a young woman with dark curly hair raised her hand. Her fingers twisted nervously. My boyfriend doesn't want me to go to Madrid. He says if I leave for a year, I'm picking my career over our relationship. How can I tell if I'm being selfish? The room fell quiet. In my mind I flashed back. 21-year-old me outside my dorm. Kale in his navy sweater saying I thought you would choose us. Lila asking me about Copenhagen. My finger hovering over that blue, accept offer, button on my laptop screen. And finally 56-year-old me dying in a hospital bed. 2 lifetimes, only one belonged fully to me. Someone who truly loves you will miss you when you leave, I said to her in the whole room. They might feel afraid. They might even tell you that fear honestly. But real love should never demand you shrink yourself down just so another person can feel secure. I paused, letting those words sink in. A healthy relationship can survive talking about 2 separate futures. An unhealthy one can only keep going if one person gives theirs up. Once the event finished, I walked toward the old international programs office. The hallway had been renovated. Fresh paint, new photos, a digital screen displaying students currently studying abroad. Copenhagen, Madrid, Seoul, Cape Town, Singapore. I stood there for a long time. On the wall hung an archive photo of my exchange cohort. There I was, 21 years old in my red coat, standing beside other students on Copenhagen's harbor. I looked young, not naive, just young. For decades in my first life I believed the greatest theft I'd suffered was being lied to about Noah's parentage. That wasn't it. The real theft was smaller, earlier. It was that moment I'd convinced myself my own future was negotiable, because the person I loved felt uncomfortable. In this new timeline, I stole nothing away from Lila. I didn't ruin Kale's life. I didn't abandon Noah. All I did was stop volunteering to carry the consequences that belonged to other people. Lila raised her son because she was his mother. Kale switched jobs, rearranged his schedule, learned to show up for pediatric doctor's appointments because he was his father. Noah grew up knowing exactly who his birth parents were. They were flawed. They hurt each other. They hurt me. But they could no longer build their freedom by sacrificing mine. That single change altered everything. I walked out of the international office. Alex leaned against a stone railing outside, reading something on his phone. He looked up when he spotted me. Finished? Yes. How did it go? Good. He only took my bag once I handed it over to him. We walked together across campus, past the business school. I glanced toward that old park bench where Kale once begged me to choose our relationship over my dreams. I didn't stop. My phone buzzed. An email from Noah. He'd gotten accepted for a summer research program in Amsterdam. Dad thinks it's a fantastic opportunity. Mom already sent me lists of good neighborhoods to live in. I'm going. A quiet laugh escaped me. Alex glanced over. What's funny? Noah got into a research program in Amsterdam. That's wonderful news. I typed my reply as we walked. Congratulations. Go. After a second's pause I added one more line. Anyone worth keeping close will know how to love you even from another city. I hit send. The afternoon sun was bright. Wind blowing across the quad. Students walked everywhere, backpacks slung over shoulders, coffee cups in their hands, carrying whole futures that nobody else had any right to take away. At 21 I once stood in this exact spot, convinced the most loving thing I could do was give my own future away. This time around, I kept it.